Insurance agencies have faced hard markets before. These are the times when agency owners and their employees are often tested with hard to place new business, clients facing price increases, or changes in their policies that require time to explain, educate, and sometimes remarket. And for an agency with a finite number of team members, all of the service requirements can create an impediment to growth, especially when hiring and training new team members takes time. So, what if cutting a day from the work week could actually grow your agency and keep your best people? Here's how one agency is not merely surviving, but they're thriving on a 4-day work week. Agency owner Michael Cruz is going to share with us how he's redesigned everything from task workflows to team culture, creating a high efficiency, low burnout environment that retains top talent. And with smart systems, shared inboxes, transparent metrics, and a reimagined team structure, this isn't just an HR experiment. It's a blueprint for the future of agency work and growth. So welcome, Michael. We're excited to speak with you today. Well, let's jump right into it. What inspired you to make a shift to a 4-day work week? And what was the tipping point for you?
So in 2024, at the beginning of 2024, I would say that that was around the time where we were about a year in, or maybe 6 months to 9 months into the hard market. I think it was 2023 of March when carriers started taking action in terms of like limiting appetite, changing guidelines. Just the game completely changed around that time, and it was like a domino effect. My team was burned out. I was burned out. We were all like wondering, how are we going to keep up with this? Customers were calling rude more than ever in terms of the significant rate increases. We couldn't find markets for them if we wanted to move them to a different carrier. And I just really had to think about, how is this going to be sustainable? I wasn't so much of worried about, retaining clients, and I was really worried about retaining my staff. My staff, I was worried that they were going to go do something else, not losing it to another agency, but just losing it out of the industry because they were completely burnt out. And so for me, that was kind of the tipping point that I had to come up with an idea of how can I solve this problem. So I started thinking, of ways of that I can combat this burnout, improve morale, and be able to retain my employees.
So, how did your team react to the idea initially? And what helped them buy in?
So essentially, what after like reading a lot of books and watching a lot of YouTube videos, I found this idea of this 4-day work week, where it was basically this idea where a gentleman talked about, hey, there is this thought process where your team can, basically get 100% of their salary for 80% of the work, with the expectation that they truly give 100% of their, their efforts. And that's where the idea of the 4-day work week, kind of was inspired. And I started reading into it. It was very fascinating because this basically schedule we've had has been around for more than 100 years, since the Henry Ford days. So I found it very fascinating that nobody was challenging this idea of like, hey, we don't need to work the same amount of hours, even though our technology has significantly increased, right? If you look at insurance 50 years ago, even 20 years ago, we didn't have raters, we didn't have management systems, we didn't have all this new technology, phone, email, but yet we're still operating, working the same amount of hours. So I presented the idea to my team, and in a very informal meeting, and everybody was like not believing that I was going to do it. Everybody's like, yeah, sure. I remember very clearly. It was Monday, April 29th. I announced it to the team, released the schedule, and the rest is history. We've been on a 4-day work week schedule since May of 2024.
So, as an agency owner, was it tough for you to get over the hurdle that giving the team more time off might actually have a really positive effect?
I knew that the if you look at what motivates people, a lot of times in jobs, you're looking at compensation and you look at time off. Time off is a huge weighing factor for employees. So in my mind, I thought, hey, if they have more time off to recharge, they can come back better, energized and ready to tackle their task and help my clients. Versus like if I force you to not take time off, and you're working overtime, Yeah, you're showing up every day, but you're not showing up with the best attitude, with the best mindset, with the most energy. So, it was a little bit of a challenge for me initially to say, I'm gonna pay you the same, but you're gonna work less. But I just needed, it was such a drastic thing that I saw it that if I didn't take action and I didn't do something drastic, I might lose my employees, and then that would be even harder for me because all the workload will fall on the owner, right? All the problems. So, I really wanted to challenge myself, challenge the industry, and look at this almost like a challenge, like make this fun, make this a game, an experiment for me and for the industry to show what it could be done.
What changes did you need to make to your agency's processes to make that model work?
So the good news is that for many years, I already started with this mindset of systemizing the way I do business, the way we service. Basically, we operate on a team-based model for servicing, meaning that we don't assign accounts to account managers. We really work as a team. The biggest challenge was the sales. The sales, we didn't operate that way. Sales operate almost in their own silos. Even though we had, a little bit of a process around sales, it wasn't really like well documented and well structured. And the sales team weren't really communicating. So the biggest hurdle was just getting the buy-in from the sales team to say, hey guys, I know you're doing, your own way, and we're gonna have to make some changes, but this is for the better. Because when you're out, somebody can step in for you, whether it's binding a policy, whether it's answering a question, gathering maybe a driver's license from a prospect for you, and we're gonna support each other so we can all have better work-life balance. So the 4-day work week allowed me to use that as leverage to convince my sales team, and it wasn't an easy transition. It took months. There were a lot of bumps, but today, if I had to go back and I look at where my sales team was a year ago versus today, um, they're collaborating more. There's more structure. There's a better culture because they were forced to collaborate. They were forced to communicate. And as long as you're building a culture of respect and transparency and fairness, it's going to work out.
That's really interesting. Can you walk us through how your shared inbox and phone systems support your team structure?
Yeah, so we had been doing a share inbox for many years. We did it first with Gmail, then we went to Outlook. And basically, the way it works is that we have one email address that the customer just has to remember for any service request. So once you activated the policy with us, we basically say, hey, here's your email address. Any questions, any requests, submit it to that one email address so you don't have to remember different people. And the reason we thought of that is because we didn't want somebody being out and then you submit your request and then it doesn't get done because that person was out, whether it's sick leave or PTO. So we started doing that many years ago, but it was very clunky because Gmail and Outlook were not really designed to handle such a high volume and collaborate. So I was actually in December searching through videos on YouTube on how to work a share inbox, and I found a tool called Help Scout. There's another one called Front that does the similar thing, which just makes the share inbox strategy a lot more manageable. So what does that mean? That means, for example, there is features in these tools that Outlook and Gmail don't have. So, for example, collision detection. Like if we have two people looking at the same email in Outlook, you can't really see that. So, a lot of times we'll be looking at an email and it just disappeared because somebody archived it, and we had no idea who did that. So, we have to go in the chat, hey, who actually archived that email? So, it would be very messy. But with this email, you can kind of see like a picture of that person viewing the email live, almost like a Word document, like a Google Doc, which avoids collision and things like that. Also, you have a trail of everything that happens, right? I can see when someone moved an email or assigned it to somebody else. We can also add notes to that specific email because before, like we would have to take the conversations either, through Teams or through call. Hey, I'm calling about this email that I sent you. Where now I can just ask you the question inside that email as a note, and the whole history of the conversation is attached to that email. So there's context around this. So we found this tool. It was a huge gamble for me because I didn't know if it was going to work, right? I just saw the video and I really sold the dream to my team, and my team was a little hesitant. But by right now, this year was probably one of the best gambles that I've done because my team loves it. The way we process email now compared to before is so much faster. The collaboration, the distribution, And as you know, after the phone, the email is the biggest volume thing that we have to handle in our agency. So having being able to be nimble and fast in emails is really important. Now, on the phone side, we had another kind of a strategy that we had to rethink because if you go look at Google reviews, one of the most common things you see with Google reviews is that people complain the agency doesn't pick up the phone, the agency doesn't return my calls. So what happens is that we're busy. We get too many calls. So a lot of times and my generation also struggles to answer the phone. The new generation is not as fond of the phone as previous generations. So I knew the phone was a problem for our agency. We get, especially after the hard market, the kind of volume of phone calls we went from getting maybe 60 to 70 calls to close to 150 to 200 calls a day during the hard market. I was reviewing my numbers on a weekly basis, and it was wild the amount of calls we would get on a daily basis. So I had to rethink. So what I did is basically I just did a round robin. So I said, hey, everybody's on the phone. Everybody gets on the phone. We all need to help the phone. So we basically set up a call queue for the entire company so that at first ring, you get anybody on the phone. We don't have like this elaborate phone tree because people hate that, in my opinion. So you get a live human on the phone as quickly as possible. And then what I did is I created call queues for each department. But by doing it by queues, I'm able to just have the phone system automatically round robin to everybody in that department. So that has helped us to reduce significantly the amount of missed calls during the day because we're able to get a live human, get someone in to answer the phone. And sometimes, even if it's just telling somebody, hey, so and so is on the line right now, she's helping a customer, but as soon as she's done, she's going to call you back and just it increases, it relieves the stress from the customer, it improves the customer experience. So I would say like those are the two main ways that we have really transitioned to how to handle the high volume from the hard market is through how do we do a share inbox and how do we do kind of a share phone system to distribute the calls.
What does your task distribution model look like? And how does it prevent bottlenecks?
So the task distribution really changed it all with Help Scout because came up with this idea of distributing tasks by teams rather than individuals. What does that mean? That means that each department, each team that I have, there's a list of roles that they do. So the way that I did is I designed my task distribution by logic of payroll efficiency and what department does what. So when the task comes in, we assign it to the right team based on that task, not by individual, but by that team. And Help Scout allows us to do that. There's no other system. Like, for example, our management system doesn't allow that. They only allow assigning tasks to an individual. But with Help Scout, I was able to create teams. So now, for example, if I get a mortgagee change, that goes to my back office team. If I get a new quote request, that goes to my sales team. And then I told my each team, hey, I need you guys to work together to distribute these tasks. Why do I believe in the teamwork rather than one person distributing the work? Because the team is aware of the workload that's coming in. So not all tasks are created equal. Some tasks takes 5 minutes, some tasks take 30 minutes. So having the team communicate like, hey, Mike, I see you got 3 vehicle changes and I have 2 vehicle changes. If you want, if you get stuck on something, let me know. I'll get these done and we can all collaborate, and kind of like take stuff from each other's plate. So it increases the collaboration between teams. And, that's something we started doing in January of this year. And it has completely changed because right now what we're doing is we're utilizing every single person we have to its maximum capacity. When you distribute work by like last names or any of the other outdated systems, what's going to happen is that you're overworking certain people some days and underworking them other days because you don't control the volume. But by utilizing every single person in that team, every single time you're just redistributing the task. And we see it in our numbers. We look at our numbers daily and we can see that the task distribution is almost like very, very evenly, not exactly because every task is differently, but very close in terms of how much task each member in each department is doing because of that distribution model.
How do you measure whether the 4-day model is actually working?
That's a great question. And that's actually a question I've been asking myself for the last year or so. Um, So what I can tell you is that what we started doing is just keeping track of metrics so we can at least have a based foundation of what numbers look like when we started. So we looked at phone calls, we looked at tasks, we looked at sales, we looked at emails, and we monitor on the daily basis, weekly and monthly. And for sales, it's pretty easy to see, right? Premium in, premium out, how many policies. For service, a little bit more complex. But when I was getting ready to do this interview, I went ahead and looked at my management system, and a very interesting thing happened. So when I looked at a snapshot from June 15th, 2024, um, to July 15th, 2024, so basically a month of work, we did 1,309 tasks. And then when I looked at that same period for this year, we did 1,303 tasks. So what that tells me is that we did a very similar amount of tasks in the same period over the last 2 years, working 4 days a week. So that was a very fascinating thing to see. Like, hey, at least we're keeping up with the same amount of tasks, working less days a week. And then for sales, we were pretty much around the same. When it comes to premium submitted, we actually had less opportunities this year than last year, but we had the same amount of premium amount. So for my sales team to work 4 days a week and still produce the same premium amount, even in the hard market. So that's how I've been able to kind of measure. It's like, hey, we're keeping up with our workload. We're not falling behind. And we have at least, performing at the same level as last year with the same amount of staff working less hours a week.
So, Michael, you mentioned that the 5-day work week has been around for 100 years. It came from Henry Ford, and there's this customer expectation that we're going to be running offices for 5 days a week. What's your advice to agency owners who are curious but skeptical about making a change like this?
So first, I want to clarify, like we still operate in a 5-day work week as an agency. Is the schedule that rotates for the employees. I will say this. I think what I'm doing, I'm a little bit ahead of the curveball, but I think eventually I'm truly bullish that I feel like eventually all industries are going to shift to a 4-day work week. It's inevitable. I mean, especially now with the inception of AI and its advancements, I think we're going to be able to keep doing more and more with less, which a lot of times is like giving back that productivity to the team and shifting the mindset from just hours work to work completed. So it's not what I tell people is you really have to think about the future of our workforce. It's been extremely hard for us in the insurance space to find and retain people. People don't find insurance sexy for whatever reason. But once you find it and once you get into the industry, if you look at it, Mike, you look at a lot of these agencies and companies, people are at it for like 20, 30 years. So why is that? Why is it that we have such a high retention when people join the industry, but it's so hard to get people in? Because once they get in, they realize, oh my God, this is a huge world that I didn't know existed. So it's a really good field. And one way that I truly believe we're going to be able to find better talent is utilizing the benefits that this industry has, which is the structure. So by you setting up your agency in such structure, it allows for a better work-life balance without jeopardizing the client experience, and then therefore allowing you to find and retain the best talents. Because guess what? There's other businesses a lot harder to implement a 4-day work week. So it has been research shown that people are even willing to take a pay cut of 25% to work less days a week. So for me, it's a matter of like, hey, you can continue on the 5-day work week, but I will recruit your employees that are working on the 5-day work week into my 4-day work week agency, and we're still going to be able to run the same amount of tasks, the same amount of production. So it's a matter of like, hey, you decide what kind of agency you want to run, but I can promise you our agencies have the ability to have the structure to produce the same amount of output with less hours, therefore increasing the happiness and the work-life balance of the employees, therefore increasing the retention of your employees, which makes the agency owners' lives a lot easier because I don't have to go and find new staff and train and start all over. So that's kind of my pitch to agency owners. This is the way to go for the future. Maybe you start in a hybrid where maybe you're doing half a day, but I promise you it is the way you're going to find and retain better talent.